Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. And today's verb is the same as yesterday's verb. This is part 2 with the verb do. So let's begin by doing a quick review of some of the common ways in which speakers and writers use the verb do. The first way you'll hear the verb do used is to mean to perform an action, to perform a task, or to perform some type of work. A second way you might hear the verb do used is to mean to achieve or complete. So it's possible that you might hear someone use the verb do to describe someone performing an action and then also use it to signal that the action has been completed or the task has been completed. A third way you might hear the verb do used is to mean to act or behave in some sort of specific way. A fourth way you'll hear the verb do used is to mean that something is suitable or acceptable. So generally with this meaning, it's a phrase like that will do or this will do. So it is acceptable, it is suitable. You should know that do is an irregular verb. To make the progressive tense, we're just going to add ing to the end to form doing. The past tense form of this verb has a different spelling. It's did, D-I-D. And the participle form of the verb is pronounced done, D-O-N-E. So now let's continue looking at some phrasal verbs. I want to note, again, this is not every single phrasal verb that exists with do, but I've tried to pick out some of the ones you're more likely to either hear as you're speaking with someone or maybe see as you're reading. And again, my focus is always on phrasal verbs that are more commonly used in the United States. So let's look at our first phrasal verb today. It's do over. This means that we are repeating an action, doing something again from the beginning. Here is an example sentence. You should do the presentation over. This might be a sentence that a teacher has said to a student who's practicing some sort of formal presentation. They're saying, maybe it didn't go so well the first time. Let's try it again. Another phrasal verb you might hear is do up. This can have a couple different meanings. It can mean to decorate something or even sort of decorate ourselves, so applying makeup to a person. So an example of this might be the girls are doing themselves up for prom. So this is generally a very formal dance for high schoolers here in the United States. A second meaning for do up, again, you might hear it more commonly used with women, but it could be with either men or women. And that's to arrange your hair in a particular style. So sometimes the word do is used as a shortened form of hairdo. So kind of like the style in which you wear your hair. So here is an example of the phrasal verb do up with the meaning of arranging your hair in a sentence. Her hair was done up in an elaborate braid. So braid is when we take different sections of our hair and kind of crisscross them. Another phrasal verb you might hear is do with. And this means to manage with something that is not optimal. So it's not perfect. It's not exactly what you want, but you can make it work. So an example of this might be something you hear in cooking. We don't have any butter, so we must do with oil. We must continue the recipe, continue cooking, and manage with something that's not exactly what we want or exactly what the recipe calls for. The last phrasal verb we're going to look at today is to do without. And this means that you are managing without something. So in the last example sentence, we were working with something that wasn't exactly right. Now in this next one, we're going to have to work without something completely. So here's an example of that. There's no milk in the refrigerator, so we'll do without it for breakfast. So this means we're going to continue making breakfast, but we're not going to use that. Here there might not be a substitute. So if you're used to drinking a glass of milk at breakfast, perhaps you'll have to have orange juice today. That's one way that you might hear that used. Now let's continue looking at our verb do in the simple future. Today we're going to compare the simple future using will with be going to. So this is something that gets taught a great deal when there is a focus or emphasis on grammar. And I think many people who grew up speaking English regularly don't think so much about what they're suggesting by using will or be going to. So it might be helpful to kind of do a quick review that generally speaking, we tend to use will when we're talking about facts, so something that will be true in the future. We use it to make predictions, what we think will happen. We use it for quick decisions, so where we haven't made a plan, but we just spontaneously decide to do something. We also use it with offers and promises. So think of I promise to do something, right? Think of that with will. We also tend to use be going to with facts and predictions. So those two things remain the same. One thing that's a little different with be going to is that we tend to use it when we're discussing our plans. So where, again, we sort of made a formal arrangement in our mind, or maybe we've discussed it with another person about things that we are going to do in the future. So I'm going to show you some examples where of sentences using will versus be going to, and we'll note if maybe they have slightly different meanings or if their meanings are exactly the same. So as a quick review, to make a simple future sentence with will, we're just using will and the base verb. Doesn't matter what our subject is, that's going to be our structure. With be going to, the be verb will change based on our subject. So we're going to use am, is, or are, depending on what our subject is. And then after that, it's exactly the same order. You're going to hear going to, and then our base verb, which today is do. So let's look at affirmative sentences first. Okay? If someone says, I will do my homework later, okay, this might be indicating a promise. This might be something a child says to their parents, right? I want to play with my friends. I will do my homework later. I promise. Okay? But if a parent asked a child, when are you going to do your homework? Right? And the child responds, I'm going to do my homework later. This might indicate that the person has a plan. I plan to do it after dinner, for example. Okay? So that might be an example where these two sentences have a slightly different meaning using will and going to. Okay? Here is another example affirmative sentence. She will do a great job as CEO. CEO is usually the top person in a company. Okay? So this to me sounds like a prediction. Maybe someone new has been hired in this role or this position. Okay? She's going to do a great job as CEO. This also sounds like a prediction. So these two sentences, I would say, have exactly the same meaning. Now let's take a look at negative sentences. Okay? If we're making a negative with will, we're going to insert not after will. You might hear some people use the contraction won't. Okay? For be going to, we're going to insert not after our be verb. And you might hear people use the contractions isn't or aren't. But there's no contraction with am. So let's look at an example. Okay? We won't do that again. We don't know what that is, but maybe there was some action that was unpleasant, and someone just doesn't want to have that experience again in the future, right? So this could be an example of a fact, right? I am making a commitment. I will not repeat this action in the future, right? It would have the same meaning if we said we aren't going to do that again. Again, that could be many different things, okay? Another negative example, he will not do the work over again. Okay? He isn't going to do the work over again. This based on the circumstances or the situation, this could be a fact, it could be a prediction. So again, our two sentences here really have the same meaning. Okay? Now let's look at making yes or no questions. To do this, we're going to start with will, then we'll have our subject, then the base verb. That's the first structure. The second structure is to start with be, and we're using a form of be that matches the subject, and the subject comes next. And then we're going to use going to and the base verb. So as one example, will they do something special to celebrate? Right? So here, this could be a prediction, wanting to know how some special event will be celebrated. Are they going to do something special to celebrate? I would say again, likely a prediction type of question here. Same thing for will the dog do a trick? Is the dog going to do a trick? So our questions here really have about the same meaning. Now let's take a couple minutes to look at some words that are related to our verb do. Today, the first one we're going to start with is the noun do over. You might remember that do over was a phrasal verb that we discussed earlier. And this noun, the meaning of it is very much connected to what we looked at, the definition of the phrasal verb. So do over as a noun, you'll notice it has a hyphen between it, so they're connected. That helps signal that this is a noun, not a phrasal verb, but this noun means a new attempt or a new opportunity to do something after an earlier or previous attempt has been unsuccessful or unsatisfactory, so not up to the level you wanted it to be. So this is a noun I heard a lot as a child and as I played with other kids. We might be playing a sport or playing a game and someone makes a mistake, right? And immediately they say, I want a do-over, right? And the article a there is also helping us know this is being used as a noun. The next noun we're going to look at is also a bit of a phrase. You might hear someone talk about do's and don'ts. Generally speaking, these are rules or guidelines for certain behaviors. Here is an example of how you might hear this used. Did you read the article, Mass Do's and Don'ts? So here, just by the title, what I would expect to see are some rules or guidelines for how I should wear a face mask, how I should take care of my face mask, as well as things I should not do with regard to my face mask. So it's really common to see this phrase, do's and don'ts, as it relates to advice. Sometimes companies will use this as they talk to new employees about how to be successful in their particular roles. The last thing we're going to look at today is the adjective do or die. And again, we've got hyphens here, and that's helping us understand that it's being used as an adjective. This is describing a situation where we really have two alternatives or two choices. One is success, and the other is complete failure or ruin. I tend to hear this adjective used a great deal in sports. So an example of a sentence using this adjective connected to sports. The next game in the series is do or die. So in many sports, teams will compete in a 7-game series. So with whoever wins 4 of those games first, they are sort of declared the winner and maybe ultimately the champion of something. So if you get to game 7, right, many times it is described as do or die, right? You're either going to win and be the champion, or you're not. You're going to fail. So I hope this week's videos have been helpful to you in better understanding how to use the verbs have and do. They are very much part of everyday communication in English. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great day.